The purpose of this channel is to bring the latest news and information to the Commonwealth. I also want to raise awareness and bring education to the stigma that's in the cannabis community. Please medicate and consume responsibly. Welcome once again to Virginia Cannabis Connection. As always, I'm your guy on the couch, Joe Parsons. You know, a lot of the stigma that we face in the cannabis community comes from politics. As a kid, and I hated politics. My family was very conservative, but we had liberal aunts and uncles, so there was always the occasional argument, especially during an election year. I never really got much into political debates until I started thinking about getting into cannabis reform. Now, ever since, especially over the last few years, I've been more vocal, to some often annoyingly. I've even lost some friends over the years, but I don't really miss them as much, as they let something as trivial as difference of opinion make them not want to be friends with me anyway. So were they really my friends? Probably not. I did my own research and made my own decisions about what was important to me. I saw the good and the bad from both sides, and now I try to fly right up the middle, and I'll support whoever I think represents the issues that matter the most to me. I hold no resentment to the Republicans of the past who started prohibition, the Democrats of the past who had no courage to fight it, but hopes that one day the politicians of today and tomorrow will work together to make a brighter future. But especially in an election year, we have to remember the past and the facts that started the divide and that are still at work today. So here goes some of those facts and my thoughts thrown in the mix. The political divide in cannabis has been going on now for over 100 years. That divide came to a head in 1970 with the inception of the Controlled Substance Act during the Nixon-Ford era. That single event put cannabis on the same level as heroin. It was deemed an evil drug with no medical value. Then we suffered through the war on drugs during the Reagan and Bush era, or as I called it, Reefer Madness Part 2. And if you don't believe me, watch any of the weed-based after-school specials back in the day, and you tell me. Finally, during the Clinton era, the president let Democratic legislators start to look into the medicinal side of our beloved plant. He started to allow states to independently research and even regulate cannabis. You know, that paved the way for California to be the first state to legalize cannabis for medical use in 1986. That started a fire that since then, through support from Democratic leaders, started a movement that has now evolved into what we now know as the modern cannabis industry. You know, the funny part about the Clinton era is that even though Clinton, as quietly as he could, opened doors for the right people to do the right things, he was ashamed of it, as he feared how it would make him look. It was a case of a decades-long political stigma that made him lie. In fact, all my Generation X people should remember the jokes about Bill Clinton. Not the Monica Lewinsky jokes either, although those were great too. But I'm talking about the, I tried it in college once, but I didn't inhale. Sure, Bill, I believe you. We all believe you. Yeah, sure, right. Well, actually, none of us did. From the media, myself, Cypress Hill, and even Dennis Miller. We all knew that you and your Phi Beta Kappa brothers rolled doobies of the good stuff that only the rich white kids could afford. Not only did you inhale, you probably drank the bong water on a dare to impress your frat brother Biff. Nonetheless, we thank you for what you did, even though you swore you had nothing to do with it. However, that progress was short-lived, because for the next 8 years we had Bush Part 2. Now, he hated the plant medicine with a passion, and literally vowed to uproot, no pun intended, the cannabis operations in California, and by then Washington State and Oregon. He sent the DEA on constant raids. He imprisoned growers and owners of medical shops. He made it next to impossible to operate due to banking regulations, and literally spent more taxpayer dollars attacking cannabis than on any other drug. The only good thing he did for cannabis is that he stated in 1999 that he still supported individual states having the right to ban it for medical use, as long as you stay in the closet and don't try to expand. Those were really hard years for me, so I was finally beginning to know who I was and what I wanted to do, and how I wanted to live in a world where I didn't feel like a monster or a criminal. It was late in the Bush administration that we decided to move to Maine, where they had started a strong working medical program that actually included flower. Then came time for the Obama era. During the Obama era, great strides were made that basically picked up where Clinton was stalled 8 years prior. He eased federal restrictions and opened even more doors. The best part is that he wasn't afraid to admit that he did in fact inhale. While I wasn't a personal fan of his healthcare system, what he did for the cannabis industry was incredible. By the end of his era, The recreational market was not only opened, but started to change the people's minds about cannabis in general, and real research was being done. And it was the beginning of the end of federal cannabis prohibition. And then there was Donald Trump. During the Trump era, he came right out and said in 2016 that he believes that cannabis is good, but only for medical uses only. His VP Mike Pence still insisted that cannabis was an evil drug, and that if he could, he would overturn all the states' rights to legalize if they chose to. Man, I'm glad that didn't happen. In fact, as an independent, I have to say that Trump, as a businessman, knew the value of the cannabis industry and all the money that it could definitely provide. So he really didn't do that much to interfere with the booming market. And that was a first for a GOP-led administration. Proof that even Republicans were starting to see the value and slowly starting to come out of the cannabis closet. However, his medical-only remarks resonated with his MAGA group, and practically every Republican-led leader has made it as difficult as possible for a reform to happen moving forward. And then, in 2020, we got Obama's Vice President, Joe Biden. Once again, progress. And this time around justice. Real justice for the victim on the war on drugs was being made. While not as fast as he said he would, and not to the full extent that was promised. But he still started righting the wrongs, overturning convictions, and started to move cannabis off the Schedule 1 list, where it had needlessly sat for over 50 years. While I think his open border policy isn't working out, and I don't quite agree with it, and I don't think that rescheduling is enough. I think a full deschedule is in order. However, I think this is the closest that legalization has ever come. And now we have 24 adult use states. That's amazing. And we still have 7 states that haven't decriminalized but do allow CBD. And they accept research and could add a program with at least medical in the near future. Those states are heavily Republican-led. And sadly, there's still 4 states that have nothing. They are still as illegal as they were in 1970. Those states are South Carolina, Kansas, Wyoming, and Idaho. Those 4 states are extremely Republican-controlled, with Idaho having a Republican control in the office of governor, the Secretary of State, Attorney General, both chambers of the state of legislation. Hell, the only thing that Democrats and independents do there is fetch coffee and shut the hell up. And now, my friends, it's 2024. President Biden up for re-election, he again has made it known that he wants to continue to get cannabis off the Schedule 1 list. Only days ago, the VP that was once famous for getting cannabis convictions in California, by any means necessary, if you know what I mean, said, sitting underneath a President Roosevelt's photo,
nobody should have to go to jail for smoking weed. And what we need to do is recognize that far too many people have been sent to jail for simple marijuana possession.
Now, if you know your cannabis history, you'll know why that was so funny. President Roosevelt fully supported the Marijuana Tax Act that actually went into law under his era in 1937, that through years of fear and stigma ended with the CSA of 1970. So definitely a chuckle to say the least. Now, a lot of people have said that this is only political pandering and just a ploy to get votes. Well, as Mother Abigail once said, mayhap it is, mayhap it ain't. But it's still more action from a cabinet than has ever been seen before. And it still opens doors for more reform to be made in the future, no matter what happens. So what about Trump? With all of his legal issues and his personal life being more in the spotlight than his party, all I know is that he wants to fix the border. Well, that's all well and good. And it does need some help. However, the border issue has always been a subject of concern ever since I was just a baby, and is something that Republicans pander with themselves every time elections are brought up. While I think it's important, but not all illegals come from the southern border. Not all of them are in a drug cartel trying to corrupt America. So what else do you have? You want to help grow a multi-billion-dollar industry that promotes jobs and has Americans actually willing to pay taxes? I haven't heard anything about that. So unless you got some cannabis policy or are going to start to tell your MAGA Republicans to stop holding up the end of federal prohibition, then sir, we have nothing further to talk about. But that's just it, my friends. From listening to everything that I just said, you should get what motivates me. Cannabis policy and ending federal prohibition. That's what I care about. That's what's important to me. Now, if that's not what you care about and you want to lean another way, well, that's great too. That's why America can actually be great again one day, because we can work together if we put our minds to it to enact change. Regardless of what party you get down with, I won't try to sway your opinion. Political beliefs are personal, and you should always vote for the things that you feel are most important. And I hope that Republicans do one day start to help end federal prohibition. But just last week, they were caught trying to push the old classic, it's a gateway drug, scare tactic. Pathetic and outdated scare stigma once again. The sad part is, do you know how many Republicans smoke or use cannabis? I see them all the time at the pot shops. They don't mind reaping the benefits of reform, buying legally because of Democratic-led bills and the work that was done by Democrats, but they condemn them around their friends. And then they glorify the GOP that actually started prohibition, that does not want it to end except for under medical use, under strict government control. Again, if that's what you want, then by all means, as an independent, I'll say you do you. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to keep being an activist for change and ending prohibition. And that's why I'm here. And the ones that feel like I do are always free to join me on the couch anytime. Well, that's my time for today. And remember, people are entitled to believe whatever they want to believe. And you should always respect that. But don't ever let people tell you what you think is important. That's for you to decide. Stay lifted, my friends.